Welcome back to Astrology in the Wild. My name is Kei Tyler. Today I'm introducing to you a special little conversation between my friend, my colleague, and fellow astrologer, Hanna and we are talking about the solar eclipse in Libra. You can find her contact information in the description box below. And as always, enjoy. Are you excited for this upcoming eclipse?
I wouldn't use the word excited. I don't know if that's the word I would use. I would say that for me personally, there's something about flip season that I don't always feel very comfortable with
Ooh.
because the eclipses being that moment in time where there is this higher, whatever you want to call it, God, the universe, fate, the higher forces, like really reshuffling things.
Yeah.
Like there's something about it that feels uncomfortable, not knowing that during that time I'm not fully in control and things can happen in, of course, big and minor ways, but there's something about it that feels uncomfortable to me. So I'm always really being, I guess, extra cautious in terms of, so it's not a season that I'm always like, oh, I'm so excited for the eclipse season coming up. So I'm trying to be more like curious and see what happens and see what's, who's coming in and what's coming in, what's coming out. And um, yeah, I think that's more of like a observant space than woohoo, eclipse is here type of
Yeah,
thing, you
my
know?
excitement comment was definitely sarcasm. But
Oh, didn't
uh,
catch that.
I would say too that like I agree with your sentiment, but there's also slightly something to me where there is a level of excitement because I get to observe. So it's like, oh, I wonder
Mhm.
what's going to happen. I can't wait to see. I wonder if I can predict, how I'm going to feel, which is generally I don't really predict how I'm going to feel. What do I predict? I predict definitely things that have to do with, the weekly astrology or, clients and things like that. But when it comes to self, it always seems like this magic mystery. Like
Mm.
super easy for you to sit down with someone and give them a chart reading based on, the solar eclipse energies, and you'd be able to create a beautiful symphony of words, right? But like if you sat down to do that for yourself, you'd be like, I don't know how it's going to really affect me. I got to see, I got to wait. So it's a very interesting thing that we do. Like trying to do this for other people and then also, taking notice for so long that eventually we're going to have some inkling of how things are going to play out.
Yeah, absolutely. And like the more I track the transits, and tell me if this is similar for you, but the more I track the transits in my life and in other people's lives as well, I notice how, again, my personal opinion, 100%, to use astrology as a deterministic tool does not work. It does not work because like even with my own chart that I like know it so well by now, like I'm seeing it translate like a planet, moving to a new house or encountering a natal planet, transiting planet, encountering a natal planet. And then I'm thinking like, oh, it's definitely going to be about this specific theme. It's obvious. This is something I've been working on. That's what's going to happen. And then like something completely different shows up. And I'm like, what? Like completely blindsided. And it's something not necessarily in a positive or negative way, but just like to show that I think that's the best way to use astrology, especially for prediction, is to be very open to understand like the essence of things, but not to be, oh, it's going to be that. And it kind of scares me when I hear this from people like, oh, I went to an astrologer and he said, this is a real story. This is a real story.
Oh, I love stories. Story time.
Uh,
Girl, I got my
More
tea.
time. I I have a friend. She's older. She's already had like two grown kids, and she told me when she was in her early 20s. This is even before she was in a relationship. She had an astrology reading, and the astrologer told her, "You're gonna have a kid who's gonna die." Like, what? Like, what do you even do with this information? Like, what is the purpose? How, and first of all, like, how can you even have, like, how can you even know that that's what the future holds for that person? And how dare you, right? Like, how dare you play God like that,
Yeah.
goddess, you know? So I think it needs to be used responsibly, especially when doing predictive work. But anyway, yeah.
No, that's actually a really cool segue. I was writing and making some content around what to expect from an astrology reading. And as I was editing the video, I started to get into a rant about how important it is to pick people who are credible, people who have learned from sources that you recognize, because the scare tactics that go on in every business, but especially in these particular businesses that have to do with prediction or other consciousness levels, psychic awareness. There, it's a scary place because people can get taken advantage of. They can be given things or prescriptions that aren't right. And I too have had many people, say like in their 50s and their 60s that I've given readings to, and they have had terrible experiences where they've been scared about what was going to happen in the future, scared that they didn't want to ever touch it again. And I just thought,
Mhm.
also, how irresponsible. How could you feel in your heart that you're doing a service to someone by not giving them the proper intentions for their placements? There's better ways to say things. So I agree with you on prediction. We can't predict when we're going to die. We can't predict the exact moment a baby's going to come out. There's all these different souls and levels of consciousness that we're playing with. And so, I do believe that astrology is such an amazing prediction tool. However, we have to be very open, like you said, to the nuances and details of how things change and how they're going to be different.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's so important and take, I think many times taken for granted.
Yeah, I agree with you. So, what do you think the sun and moon in Libra actually brings to the table? Like, not in the eclipse sense, but just bare bones. If someone had these placements or they're seeing them in the chart, what are some ideas that come to your mind?
And it's so funny you started out with Sun and Moon and Libra because I forgot. I was like, oh my God, because I was looking at the transits this morning and I'm seeing that Mercury just moved into Libra. So it's 0 degrees. And we're here doing
Yes.
the Libra work.
Ah,
That's so perfect. Like
it
I did not plan that when when we talked about
you
this
could
date.
have, because you even changed your schedule for us to meet earlier. You know what I mean? So we couldn't have predicted that this would happen, but we were close. We were close.
I love 0 degree. Like I just something about this is my story. This is my soul story. Before I came in, I was like, I don't want to be born. I don't want my date of birth to be an odd number. It needs to be even. So I was born through December 28th, 1988, and my time of birth is also even. So I love the zeros. Like for some reason, it's just like makes me so happy when I see like a new planet in the 0 degree. But anyways, I think because especially like we have Sun and Moon now in Libra, the eclipse is happening in Libra, Mercury is now in Libra. So like I would say, and then going back to your question, like if someone is born with this configuration, or maybe just a lot of Libra qualities and planets and focus, I would say that there is a lot of from the focus of their consciousness and also our consciousness now because we're all in this Libra moment I would say it's a lot about learning through others, right?
Yeah.
And looking at things from other people's perspectives and different perspectives. Listening, being in conversation, which is what we're doing, and learning from each other and creating alliances with people that maybe people that we have a lot in common with, but also people that we don't. I think that's why Libra is also connected to our enemies, right? Like people that can give us something that we don't have, or sometimes we don't even know we need. Um, yeah. What are your thoughts?
As you were talking, you made a good point about, kind of going out and looking for something that's missing. And I know quite a few Libra people, either Libra moon or seventh house heavy or sun in Libra, but they really do like the opposite. So there's like this deep attraction to have the opposite sign of them, something that they don't have, like you said, right? So a lot of like interracial dating and a lot of needing different kinds of foods. And, even this idea of the grass is greener on the other side.
Mm,
Mm. I've had many friends who have been in situations that they've asked for, and then they come back to me and they're like, I went to the other side. I broke up with the guy. I did the thing and I hate it. And so, while like wanting to reach for this thing that it feels like it's new and it's fresh and it's different, sometimes we can be fooled and fall into the same kind of trap. And so the word discernment in Libra is a huge idea, right? It's not even an idea, it's a verb, it's a noun. I don't know which one it is, but the fact that we actively have to do that during this whole season is enormous. And then on top of the fact that, it's an eclipse season, it's the last Libra eclipse for what, the next 8 or 9 years till the nodal axis changes again. And so it is kind of monumental. How do you feel?
I actually looked this up. Our next Libra eclipse won't be until 2033. I
Boom.
believe April. I believe April 2033. I might be wrong.
Mm,
Um, but yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And like, what do you think in terms of, because yes, it's Libra season. We've been having these eclipses, happening in the Aries Libra axis. This is the last one, which is so like there's such a paradox because new moons being that moment of seeding, but it's also the last Libra
yeah.
eclipse. So it's
Yeah.
like I'm an alpha but omega at the same time. Which one? Which one? It's like how and like what do you see in terms of like the meaning of this eclipse, for everyone collectively speaking, with Mercury there as well, right?
That is a big loaded question. I do think that at its core essence that it definitely has to do with balancing our sense of self. So, okay, I'll tell a story. So in April 19th of 2023, we had that really major eclipse, the one right before we were able to see it in its full entirety. And the path was going from Texas up to the east coast of the United States. And on that day, I had consulted with someone about, you know, me and my wife were in our van and we had this bright idea that we were going to go to the East Coast and go see if this was a place that we wanted to inhabit. It was somewhere I'd never been before. We had been in California and just traveling all over, living off grid, sleeping in grocery store parking lots and our friends'
Wow.
and just the gamut. I was done. I was so physically done. So I'm like, okay, we're going to take this adventure. So I consulted with this friend, and this friend said, during this eclipse, you should probably ask for your home, your sense of where you're supposed to be, instead of trying to figure it out through astrocartography, right? Or trying to figure it out because, I've already been all of these places, so maybe I need to go all the way over here. So there was this Libra thing that was happening where it's like I wasn't happy with what was happening, and I needed to seek that which I didn't have, which this was this feeling of being completely me, having all of my resources and my needs met. And so through the trials and tribulations and coming back and forth, now I'm at a point where everything that I asked for has been manifest. It is
Wow.
coming to a close. So my home chose me. My family and my wife's family asked us to come home, asked us to be a part of the family, asked us to come into their home and make space. And we're remodeling the basement. It should be done sometime in November. And I'm with my friends and my family, and I have a sense of settled that has come about. And so it does feel like a closing, but then an opening as well, because I wanted something so settled for myself. And now that it's finally here, it feels like magic. It feels like it just happened, but it's been rolling for some time. And the reason I brought up that date is because, well, Mars was in Cancer at the same time. Saturn was also in Pisces, like it is now. And so there's like, to me, there's kind of like a reverberation. Um, how do you feel? Do you remember that time frame for yourself, that eclipse cycle, when they were first getting hot in Aries season?
I don't think I mean, there was something sick. God, I think in terms of big activations that I remember, because I usually do a little eclipse journal, because I've noticed um, certain things that happen during eclipse season, and like, I'm talking about like the whole like 6 week, like 6 to 7 week like period before, during, and after the eclipses, that I keep track of, like kind of like the main things that are happening in my life. If it's like big conversations, I mean, it doesn't have to be big, but just like anything that's noticeable, that I'm like, okay, this might be important. Maybe it's not now, but this might be important. Like even the fact that we're having this conversation during the eclipse season, like to me, that's important. Like it's more meaningful than if it's like a month ago or in December. You know what I mean? Like there's just something that I think is juicier. And I like to write things down and kind of keep track. And what I've noticed is when something starts during an eclipse season,
Mm.
every eclipse season it gets reactivated, even if it's in a minor way. And again, this is just like my experience tracking my own life. But I've noticed that, like, so for example, I had the very first time I did anything related to like public speaking within, like talking about astrology to other people, it was during eclipse season. I got invited last minute to talk in like a group, and this was an online gathering.
Wait a second,
And
but
then
don't you also have the moon on the nodes? This isn't fair. Like, this isn't fair. This is pretty magical.
yeah, I mean, it's just interesting to track. So the last that eclipse that you're talking about, I actually started a like weather type of like astrological weather forecast. Um, and like I started this like whole thing with memberships that people can like join for the individual events each month, or they can sign up for to receive the forecast every month. So that's what happened during that specific eclipse. I mean, I'm sure many other things that I would have to I have them written down, but yeah, I think that's what happened during that eclipse. But going back to this one in terms of um the Libra, that I've been thinking a lot about this and asking people about it and seeing what's happening. especially because this is the last one in Libra for, the next, what, 10 years, 9, 10 years. Um, it goes back exactly to what you said, how, because Libra is relationships, right? Relationships with not just romantic relationships, relationship with anyone in our life, and, our friends, our family.
To
Um,
anything, a relationship or having that relational aspect in a general sense, right?
yeah,
Go back to what you're saying.
my relationship with my plants, everything. Um, and that whole thing about how and exactly what you said, like, what are my needs? Am I satisfied? Right? Like, is this balanced? And like balance itself is like a huge thing because the feeling balanced shifts, doesn't it? It's not ecstatic. It's gonna, right, move and change, and that constant give and get. How am I showing up? How's the other person showing? Exactly, exactly. So I
It's
think it's
or like this. Yeah.
or
Good point.
like that,
Yeah,
you know.
hey, it's such a good point.
So So I just think that, like, collectively speaking, I think relationships is on the table for all of us. And
Yeah.
of course, it's going to depend on, each person's context because some people are going to be married, some people are going to be single, some people are going to be transitioning, some people are going to be getting engaged, right? Every person is going to have their own life context and circumstances. But because Black Moon Lilith is in this equation,
Uh,
yeah.
yeah, wow. 10 degrees. Wow. That's huge.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
what does this like inform you of in terms of like seeing this very dark spot?
And Juno is not, I mean, it's 8 degrees away, right? But Juno's also there. So it's like this
Yeah.
huge Libra party. Everyone's like, let's go to Libra. Let's hang out in Libra now. Um, it just emphasizes so much anything related. I think relationships, period, is like on the spotlight right now. That's huge, collectively speaking, in our personal lives. Um, because I mean I'm not an expert in Lilith, but I know that the significance of Lilith is very much about the feminine in all of us, male and female, but the feminine, our feminine side, and where it's been repressed, not valued, not allowed to be expressed fully, not nurtured for whatever reason, because it wasn't accepted, because of the family, the social conditioning, the cultural conditioning. There could be so many reasons,
Yeah.
but it's that we can call it our shadow, right? Part of our shadow, part of what's hidden within, and not always, sometimes not always even known. And it's connected to, right now, connected to our relationships, our alliances, our partnerships, the other people in our life. So I think that's extremely important for us to be paying attention to what's coming up. Maybe for some people, it's realizing, hey, I'm too much of a people pleaser. I am the supportive actor in this relationship. You know, maybe it's the opposite. Maybe I'm the alpha all the time and I'm the one who's making all the decisions and I need more support or I need to give space for the other person. So there could be so many different just so many different contexts of how these shadows can come through and how these themes can be expressed. And I think that's the magic of like astrology. And like we have this big picture here, and then we do our own work of like
Yeah.
observing, reflecting, paying attention, taking notes. What are your thoughts?
It's really important that you mentioned Lilith. Usually it is in my chart calculations, but sometimes to simplify for people, I remove it because it is kind
Right.
of like a really big loaded thing when it comes to the feminine archetype. and how we feel we've been represented or misrepresented um, in space, in life, over millennia. And so, it's very interesting. And I have to mention it. I'm not really into politics per se, even though I have my Obama election cup from 2008.
But I'm not into politics, okay? I just brought my political mug to this conversation, but I'm not into
Right.
politics.
I was trying to give some Sun in Leo and Moon in Taurus vibes over here with my Obama cup of Obama. But the fact that we're having another candidate who is multicultural, multiracial, who is now feminine. And this is a big deal whether she gets elected or not, because it's the first time, the second time actually, that we're seeing a woman rise up to a very
Mhm.
toxic situation and offering something of solace, offering um, some solidarity, and even,
Those-
potentially addressing the getting back the things that we've lost. I love her running mate. He and her both just seem like a softer energy. Not soft as in unable to do hard things, but softer in I don't feel like I have to worry about every single need. And so
Mhm.
it's a Venusian kind of feeling to see this dynamic come in, because I remember when before she had even gotten announced, um, it was feeling very dire. I was like, "Ugh, this is what we have to choose from. This feels very like all of my rights as a woman are going to systematically be taken away even more. And the choices that I had didn't seem to represent me at all. And so now there is this representation somewhere. Some leader is saying, we deserve to have a voice. We deserve to show up the way that we are. We're allowed to show up as multidimensional, multicultural, multi-connected beings. And I really love that message. Um, and so I just wanted to point to the fact that, like, the feminine is really in our faces, in social media, and, of course, our leadership. And so I just feel like it's a really wonderful thing to see.
Well, and I'm just like listening to you and looking at the chart, and you're talking about messages and the voice and speaking up, and it's how Lilith, Mercury is there. I mean,
Yeah,
is that right? Like Lilith and Mercury are right next to each other, so it's so much about speaking, right? Talking, sharing, speaking up. What is our message?
yeah.
And also at the same time, what is the other person's message as well?
Yeah.
Is there a balance?
Can you listen?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And what does it mean to truly listen? Is
Yeah.
it thinking about your next response, or is it deeply listening to find the deeper nuances to get to know more of the intent of that person, or um, maybe deeper motivations? And so I
Mm.
wanted to impart that, like, there is this deep level of connection that can be made, and I want to say that just because we have this grand water trine in the chart, and it's watery, it's juicy, it's wet, right? It is everything that we want to have um, when it comes to connecting to just like this higher feeling of love, and maybe love for oneself, just looking around and saying, I love this about this aspect of my life, or I love the fact that I've changed this for myself. And it can be really small and minute, or it could be large, but there's this really process oriented thing that's happening. Um, and so within the listening, because I had been reading this book, it's because it's called Of Spirit and Water by Malidoma Somé. And I remember telling you about this, and it's about this African shaman who kind of tells about his journey, and he is in his tribe a water bearer. He holds water. He he's the water carrier of his tribe, and he happened to be an Aquarius, but
Of
also,
course.
of course, right? But also, we have all of this water in the chart, and when I'm reading this book, it was like every single story was either a Cancer situation, Scorpio situation, or a Pisces situation. It was very deep. And in his conversations, he talked a lot about going back home and connecting with our ancestors. And I just wonder, do you feel like there's some of this essence, even as Pluto is in its last degree, the 29th degree of Capricorn, do you feel like there's a calling to that? Have you heard those callings? Like I just yeah, I want to see how you feel.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's such a great question and topic, especially because of the Mars in Cancer squaring the nodal axis, um, doing its thing, right? Because it's going to move through Cancer, then it's going to station, go retrograde, I mean, move into Leo, and then retrograde, go back to Cancer. So we're going to have a lot of time with this Mars transiting Cancer, which it's actually in my fourth house. Yay, family stuff, you know. Woo-hoo. So actually, I wrote a newsletter about this Mars because it's like you said, it's very watery, right? And it's not. I think there's a level of discomfort because it's highly emotional. I think we're all feeling. I certainly am feeling more, and I think the the risk is really because we're all feeling more, and there's that chance of being triggered more easily. We're all more sensitive and tender, and the skin is like more inflamed, right? And things hurt more, that type of um, feeling, that we can feel more threatened, more reactive, more inflamed, more like I need to defend myself or whatever, my family, my support system, my people, my home. It's that sense. I think our sense of safety can get triggered a lot more easily. And I've definitely been feeling that, especially because it's in my fourth house. So it's like double Cancer, like triple water. Um, how like it, so my question for you is like, what are some of the ways that can help diffuse some of these energies, and how can we work with these energies in a way that we can honor our feelings and we're not bypassing them, and like acknowledging, hey, I am extra sensitive, I am um just I'm getting triggered more often. So how can we acknowledge that and validate that, but also not be completely like drown in it with
Yeah.
all this water, with the Venus and the Saturn? Do you have any
Yeah,
words of wisdom?
it's a good question. When it comes to things like this, with all of this water, water signs always remind me of the fact that we need to remove ourselves from a situation and go into seclusion. There's a level of being alone that allows us to properly deal with the emotions. And honestly, when we get to emotional states, we're always so afraid that once we open Pandora's box, we can't close it again. We're going to become a well of tears for the rest of eternity. That's just not true. What these tears, what these painful and emotional events have the opportunity to do is to get to the very root of the issue. And so, when you're having these moments alone and you're crying and you're thinking about something that happened to you when you were 22, and then all of a sudden you're thinking about something that happened to you when you're 15, and then, oh shit, you're 8 and you're pissed. That is the point of what I think these energies are trying to get to, is to the very core of, all right, I want to be in relationship with other people in a new way, but I got to get right with myself first. And
Hmm.
I'm hearing language from other people talk about, I'm going to go to therapy. So there's this psychological aspect with Libra, with all of this water as well, that like I need to go sit down with my thoughts with someone else and have a mediator between me and my mind and my emotions, and to have a safe space to cry even harder because this person's going to protect me. This person's going to stop me if it gets too crazy. And so, you know, there's again, we're dealing with balances. We keep oscillating back and forth between alone and being with someone else, and having this mediator. It does feel difficult to like hash out in our mind, but we have to remember that, like you said, this thing isn't static. This thing isn't one way. And so we have to go out when we feel resourced, when we feel ready to go make connections with other people. We have to be willing to listen and take in this information that may or may not feel good. Take the time to reflect and then come back out again. And maybe not in the same ways. Maybe we're coming back out to speak with friends, or to have a deeper conversation with family. Um, but I think that's one of the ways, as well as, you know, because I had been doing a little bit of reading about ancestral work, um, it kind of taught me how we can invite the ancestors to give us information about what we can do next, how we can be closer to one another, how we can relate in a better way. Um, and so, what I've been doing as a ritual for myself, bringing ritual back in my life has really been a big improvement. But asking these healthy, healed ancestors to come by lighting a candle, by inviting them into your space in a safe way. So, of course, you're not going to call out to every ancestor and all. Not a good idea.
Hmm.
But if you can imagine, if you can think about the healthiest forms of people in your family that you've seen, you can associate some of those faces, some of the stories. Invite those ideas and emotions in when you're lighting this candle and you're saying to the ancestors, I'm here. I'm here to follow the steps. I'm wanting a better relationship to me and to you and to the world. Um, and since I've been doing that, it just seems like synchronicity, while it has always really been in my face, now it just seems like a blessing, like more of a blessing. Seems like grandparents' blessings, like it just seems like something more is happening, something more magical. And like, can we talk about that? Like, more
I
magic?
love that. I love that so much. And even just like you saying, like going back to the wisdom of my ancestors, like ritual is such a huge part of our like our lineages. Like ritual was, it used to be the way of existence, right? Like you're communing with you're communing with nature, you're communing with the stars, you're communing with, the eclipse season, you're like it's so amazing. I love, like, this just gets me so excited because it's like these lost ways that are essential and that we're now recovering. I love that so much. And one thing that I've learned that I've been doing, especially when doing ancestral work that you mentioned, is the language I've been using is calling in my um, benevolent, elevated ancestors. Because I learned that, because before I was just calling my ancestors, I was like, well, but do you want every single one of them around? I don't know. Maybe I don't. So I was like, oh, I gotta change that language. as soon as possible. So I did, and I mean, as you know, I have a lot of Capricorns. So I think, I mean, I think this is for all of us, but especially if you have that axis of Cancer Capricorn in your chart, and especially when the transits, when there's, things going on in that axis, it's so important to remember that we are here on the behalf of those before us.
Can I ask a
Like we are that. Of course.
This inspired me to ask because you had shared a chart of where you're from. And
Yeah.
the year that I saw on this chart, I have not seen
Yeah.
a place this old. You come from a place, I mean, is this where your family is from?
Yeah, but so I believe I used the date. I don't remember it because, yeah, I really don't remember. Like, it
The
has to do
incorporation?
with the day it became a city or
Yeah.
something like that.
Mhm.
Right, right? Or something, yeah.
Usually
So
called
it
an
was,
incorporation date.
okay,
Yeah.
good to know. But yeah, it was like, it's old, but it's also because I'm from Brazil, so it's like it's a newer country in the sense of like when the colonizers came, when it became a real country. But if we're talking about native indigenous traditions,
We don't know, right? But still, I'd never seen a chart that old compared to such a young person. And I wonder, what it's like to find connections to your ancestors when you live in a place that um, has been there. And yes, changed by colonization, of course, all throughout the whole world. But is it any easier to connect when you're from a place that is so deep and enriched in its kind of natural state? Or is it even that way?
oh my God, that's now you're really opening up a huge Pandora box. That
I'm here to
like
mediate. I
this
won't let
is
you go off the deep end.
wild. No, it's so wild because there's so many ways to talk about this theme. But one of them is that um, I'm from this land of so much cultural, ancestral wealth, because so I'm from a city where this is where the slave ships would arrive as the first capital of Brazil. So you have the slave ships coming from Africa, and then you have the Portuguese and the Spanish, especially Portuguese, but you have the European people coming, that um, mix, and then you have the indigenous tradition. So it's like this huge mix of traditions mixing, coming together. Um, and I've always felt like a fish out of water. I can relate to anything. Like this is my homeland, but I don't feel at home, type of thing. And I found out recently I did an ancestry test that I barely have any indigenous ancestry. I don't have any, pretty much none from that land. And I have very little African ancestry as well. So it's mostly European. And I was like kind of shocked because most people in that place in Brazil, in that region of Brazil, has that mix really strongly. And I'm thinking like, well, that kind of explains why, this not always, it doesn't always feel like home. And I have all these different things that come up for me. This is a huge conversation.
This is
Um, it's
whoa.
so astrology has helped me so much, just understanding that part of my life and my own difficulties and my own, there's so much about home. I mean, you mentioned like I'm a moon on the nodes. I have Chiron in the fourth in Cancer. So there's a lot about home, and I have a lot of Capricorns. So it's just like a lot about ancestry and where I'm coming from, and it's a huge conversation. But and it's interesting that we're having that when this Mars in Cancer is squaring the nodal axis. It's in my fourth house. Um, does that answer your question? I don't know if it does
Girl.
because there's so many things that I could say, you
Yes.
know?
Like, thank you for
Have
touching.
you done that? Have you looked at your chart in relationship to where you're from? No.
Oh, yes. Yes, I have. I thought you meant a DNA test. I'll tell you,
Oh,
I think that's one conspiracy that I cannot like unthink for myself is that they collect our spit and then they use it for other things. And so I just feel like they have a vat of spit that they're taking our DNA and making replicas. So I have not done a DNA test. My brother
mhm.
has. And my brother says that we are mostly Ethiopian, even though my father comes from Trinidad. So um, definitely part of the slave trade at one point in time. But I've never been to either place. So my connection to my ancestry is very minute. So I grew up in LA, which I mean, culture wise, I mean, what can you say? I mean, you think about pop culture. You think about that's where everybody who acts, that's where they live. Um,
Everybody wants to go to Hollywood.
yeah, right. Everybody is
Yeah.
ambitious and there's people from all over. A majority of my life I've spent in properly segregated areas. So LA has all of these different spots, like most major cities. You've got blacks and whites and, Hispanics and blah, blah, blah. And I got the opportunity to live with every single one of them in their particular areas, which was wonderful. But having a
Yeah.
sense of home and connection is not in LA. In California as a state, there's so many places where I have felt release and connection. And I'd say I feel that very much in the Bay Area, but I'd be interested to see, how I felt, going to original places of origin, which I intend to do soon. I think 2025,
Hmm.
plans to go search that out. But
Well, and the other thing about when we're talking about lineage and bloodlines and ancestry, like yeah, we're talking about DNA and blood, right? But what about our spiritual bloodlines? That's a whole nother thing too, that, you
wait,
know,
tell me more.
well, because like I think it goes back to what you're saying, like that sense of connection, that, what are the places or the spiritual traditions that we all have those places, right? Like we've never been to, but it's kind of like I feel so drawn, or it's a way of existing, or if it's a way of, being in life and history and times in history. I mean, there's so much. I think there's so much richness and wealth if we do that, paying attention to what is speaking to us, right? That doesn't necessarily make sense because, like, when I was looking at my um, results, I was thinking, like, I feel a huge connect, always have to Egypt, always have. And to me, that's part of my spiritual tradition. Like I remember being like 3 years old and like learning hieroglyphics. I mean, who does that? I had this magazine with all the hieroglyphics, and it's like, so to me, that's part of my tradition that I don't have. Like I have, I think, 0.1% Egyptian in my my test, but I was like, oh my God, I have something, but it's not like I'm from that tradition that I have people in my family that was involved in those practices or that spiritual knowledge, but that's what I feel super connected to. So I think that's also important, when we're doing pilgrimage, when we're doing ancestral work, when we're calling in our benevolent ancestors, to also take into consideration that it's not just about the physical. There's something much deeper happening too. And I think it's a matter of us also paying attention. Like, what is speaking to me? What's calling my attention? And that goes back to what you're saying. We need to retreat. Like, we need to kind of deactivate a little bit of like the mental stimulation and all the things that we have to get done in a day, all the mercurial aspects of life, to get into the Pisces, especially with the Saturn and Pisces right now. And even this conversation, I think it's hugely, we're talking about traditions and ancestry and the spiritual side of it. So I think that's really important for us to connect more and more with, because if we are really the voice of those traditions, if we're here to speak on the behalf, not to do anything that's huge, but just to exist in a way where you are taking into consideration that you are part of something bigger and older and deeper, and how you're existing and being in your life is part of that. And that's going to impact everyone that you come into connection with.
Yeah.
So I
You know,
think it's important. It's very important,
it is
right?
important. I want to at least before we end talk about this spiritual essence. Like I want to add a little bit more to that. So we're talking about connecting to our literal and physical and DNA sense of connection. And then you're like, but what about our spiritual connection? And I'm like, oh, yeah, right? Like, can we consider things like astrology, tarot, those types of things to be our traditions? Are those our ancestral ties in any form or fashion? Now, like, I wonder too, because, some people know an auntie that gave them a book, or, someone's great uncle was an astrologer. But what if we don't have that, but we feel this connection to this I want to say this like spiritual mechanism.
Hmm.
What do you think about that? Do you think that that is something that we can claim? Or is it just like it's a modality? How do you feel?
That's an incredible question. I do think we should claim it in the sense that if, again, it goes back to what is speaking to me. If astrology is speaking to you, and I don't mean I'm interested, I'm curious, I read a book. I'm talking about if you're really committed to really learning, studying, understanding, um, being an astrologer or using astrology, not necessarily professionally, but on a daily basis with the people in your life. If you are, and that could go, I'm talking about any tradition, like any tradition, any practice. If you're doing it with the right intention, if you're using it for the greater good, and if you're using it with responsibility and you feel that deep connection with it, I absolutely think you should claim it. I think it's important to claim it. I don't mean claiming it in the sense of, oh, I love tarot and I do tarot readings every 6 months. So I'm here to speak on the behalf of the generation. I'm here to speak on the behalf. I think we need to like be reasonable too,
Yeah.
But if you're involved with something, if it makes your heart beat faster, even if there's no I mean, just using astrology as an example, if you're committed to it, if you're devoted to it, if you're dedicated to it, if you like, it makes you. I mean, and then again, it goes back to the cancer. If it makes you feel like you belong to that, why not? You know, and it doesn't mean you need to like shout it every time you meet someone who's like, I am part of the astrological tradition from the, but to yourself. And I mean, that's part of my work when I do astrological work. I always call in my benevolent elevated ancestors to be with me, and also my, and I call in um, the great masters of astrology as well to guide me and direct me in being, in stepping into those shoes and doing my part of the work,
That's,
right? Within that great tradition. Well, how do you feel? Tell me about how you feel.
I could probably talk at length about this because I am always inside ruminating about things. And, with astrology, it's not based on location. It's not based on skin color or family or caste or any of those things, which kind of makes it a really wonderful tradition to connect to. I have found many of my family members in this group of astrologers, this very broad, umbrella.
Yeah.
um, they have become my people. They have become the people that give me a sense of belonging. And so, for those of you that are out there in the world who have no family, don't know where you come from, maybe you're even adopted, there is this connection for you, but you've got to most definitely connect to the spiritual sense of yourself and where that falls in line for you. So I just wanted to mention that, like, it can look like something like astrology. It can be something like tarot. It can be your European roots. It can be all of these things that give us a sense of belonging, but also help us seek and search for that what we feel is missing. Um, so yeah, that's kind of a small tidbit of what I have to say about it.
This is a huge conversation, right? Like this is a huge theme.